China now increasingly unhappy about a number of issues. And in the mainstream, even in the mainstream newspapers, we have almost several days I was in Beijing. China Daily had stories on pollution almost every day. And there was a story about a Danish executive who actually has been transferred to Singapore from Beijing because of concerns for his family's health, given the pollution in Beijing. And there were a lot of stories about social security, aging, and other issues. And then the anticipation of what the third planet will deliver. So there are really, I think, major forces at work in China, which are transforming the country. The country's transition is still, of course, full of contradictions. And our panelists, I think, will provide some answers to that. I just want to go through some of those images that you might have come across about sort of the kind of pollution that people in China suffer, yet at the same time they really try to exercise and stay healthy. And young kids who have to do their exercises indoors rather than outdoors in such an environment. And people we talk to in China do becoming very frustrated about the environment. Aging, I think we're going to touch on aging and the implications of the demographic shifts in China are going to generate huge challenge for China. We have the income disparity problem, and China is really becoming one of the largest consumer for tourist products, particularly those from Europe. At the same time, we do have people who are struggling. And then, of course, Westerners are purchasing Chinese products because they are inexpensive. And this is part of the reasons for China's success in terms of its economic growth. Poverty issue, income disparity, you can see the trend quickly moving. And I don't think there's any sign of an immediate reverse. And Professor Lin in his talk, despite his optimism, he talked about one of the key problems of China's economic growth now is actually the perhaps unintended consequence of income disparity. Even though I think the language China has been able to address some of the problems related to poverty. Some of you have seen this. This is the world's largest building in Chengdu. Mr. Li might want to build another bigger one. Amazing building, big and everything inside. But there are also empty malls. People talk about ghost towns and empty malls. This one is not in Chengdu, this one is in Dongguan, where there's supposed to be such a concentration of population. And also, it's a quite wealthy part of China, but yet we have this kind of problem. So there are challenges socially, there are probably challenges for business as well. We'll touch upon corporate social responsibility. People use different phrases to describe corporate social responsibility in China, which is really a changing landscape. People talk about great leap forward. I've come across other headlines such as wind of change. So this is, I think, a dimension which is going to be increasingly more important. We have Diana here will talk about it. And finally, I just want to end up on this particular chart, basically showing that China had gone through 3 major phases of economic reforms since Deng Xiaoping started the reform process. And then there were times of challenges, and after 1989, I think China faced a very difficult period. And then Deng Xiaoping um, conducting the so-called Southern Tour, and again that turned the economy around. And then again by entering the World Trade Organization, China find new energy and motivation to move the economy. To what extent Xi Jinping and his leadership would really introduce substantial and meaningful reforms is something that I think now we're all pointing the point. What has come out from the third panel that some of you probably have read is really, I think, broad outline of some ambitious plans, and we don't know yet exactly what are the details. So with that, I would like to invite, maybe ask Professor Peng Shijie, demographic changes in China seems to be a very fundamental sort of trend which is going to shape social and economic life in China, perhaps even political life. And the problem of aging has always been mentioned. And there are people who are saying that China is becoming old before it becomes wealthy. And there are also other issues like labor implications, social security problems, social tensions as a result of all these demographic shifts. Being one of China's top demographers, do you think the demographic shifts are going to be so challenging that China cannot overcome?
Yeah. First, I would like to very briefly describe what happened in China in terms of demographic transition. So in general, we can say China is at the historical turning point for the population dynamics. So actually, we can say, on the one hand, China's population continues to grow, but with a much slower growth rate. Over the last 10 years, the growth rate, annual growth rate is 0.5%. So it's a very low growth rate. So, but with the demographic momentum, so the total population of China will continue to grow. That's one general situation. Then, in China, the total fertility rate has been as low as 1.5 over the last almost 20 years. Very similar to the case in Singapore. So with this kind of very low fertility rate, so the exact number of the total fertility rate is still a topic for the academic research. A lot of disagreement on what is exactly total fertility rate in China. But with the very low fertility in China, and with people living longer in China, so this results in basically two demographic consequences. The first is rapid population aging. At this moment in China, we have about 200 million people older than 60 years. This means roughly accounting for 13% of the total Chinese population. So the aging, proportion of the aging will increase very rapidly in the next 10 or 20 years. So by the year 2030, there will be more than 300 million elderly people in China. And in around the 2040 or 2045, there will be more than 400 million elderly people living in China. Although India will quite soon, India will succeed China becoming the largest populated economy in the world. But China will remain as a country with the largest elderly population through the next almost entire century. The aging will be the situation. Then China also is at the threshold for the declining of the labor force supply. So this also is a very alarming time point. In the year 2012, the working age population in China for the first time declined in Chinese modern history. So this, although we cannot say this is the working age population is exactly the labor force, but actually it's the working age population. Usually we talk about the people aged 15 to 60 in China. So this is a potential labor force. So this means that generally in the future, the general potential labor resources will decline. And not only the total number of the labor force is declining. And also the labor force participation rate is also declining in China. Just like that in Singapore. In Singapore, your labor force participation rate is increasing, especially the females, women's labor force participation rate is increasing over the last 20 or 10 years. But in China, in general, the labor force participation rate is declining. So on the whole, for example, for men, the labor force participation rate declined from 84% now down to the 80%, the 4 percentage point decline. So this it means that the cheap labor were no longer the case in China. Because when we talk about the cheap labor, on the one hand, it's plenty of the abundant labor force supply, and also will be limited limited employment opportunities. But these two factors are all the situation are changing. On the one hand, the government purposely increased the wage in China. So it means the Chinese government, before the third planning, they have a general plan, so doubling the income over the 7 years time period. It means every year the annual income increase will be something more than 10% annually. So this, even without demographic changes, the government policy to double the income will also increase the labor force and labor cost. So the government policy, together with the demographic changes, so will push China's labor cost increase in the future. And then there are the greater trend, a very rapid trend for the urbanization. Over the last 10 years, the annual increase of the urban population is 1.3 percentage point. So in other words, every year there will be something like 15 million rural population move to urban population, either by the administrative territory changes or by this kind of rural migration. This is the urbanization, on the one hand, could be treated as a new engine for China's future economic growth. But on the other hand, also create a lot of the expectations and will reshape China's society and China's economy. Because how to integrate the newcomers to the urban areas with this kind of older local urban residents is a big challenge. Some data set, Professor Gandhi will say also later. So on the one hand, we have something like 400 million, we call it the urban residents. So they have the urban household registration status. On the other hand, we have something like 260 million rural urban migrants. So they live in the urban area, they work in the urban area, they make a contribution to the urban economy, but they do not get the full benefit of the urban welfare systems. So the integration of the rural migrants with the urban population will be a huge task for China's reforms. And in addition to this kind of the economic reforms, we also see that the rural-urban migration and urbanization process, on the one hand, make a lot of contribution to China's urban development. On the other hand, it's also become very negative impact on China's rural development. Because if you went to the rural area, you will find that the major population in the rural area are elderly, are the young, or some women. So the young labor force, most of them are moving to the urban areas. So this, on the one hand, it's slow down the urban aging process. But on the other hand, the worsening the aging situation in the rural areas. So this makes China's effort to provide social protection, to provide a pension to everyone in China become an even more difficult task. So in addition to this kind of the migration, to the urbanization, to the labor force, and also another alarming demographic trend is its abnormal sex ratio at birth. So this is the abnormal sex ratio. Now it's in the year 2010. 118 boys to 100 girls. This means this situation did not change over the last more than 20 or 30 years. And this creates a huge risk amount for China's future societal stabilizations. It means in the next 10 years, in the marriage market, people aged 20 to 40 or 20 to 44 is we call the people marriageable ages. In that kind of age range, there will be 30 million more men than women. So how to provide for the government to provide a bride to the married boys, and how to get the society can absorb, can solve this problem. I think it's also a great challenge to the Chinese society and the Chinese government. So but for the government also have some tendencies, because the government usually talk about the short-term things, because they are term in 5 years, or at longest in 10 years. So when we talk about these demographic changes, their implications are much longer. It's tended to the far future. So it's very difficult to government, especially to the current government, to change the population policy, to try to solve the problems at the cost of slow down the current development, or current growth, or use the current government expenditures for the sake of the future generation or future economic growth. It's very difficult for governments to get a balance. But as we talk about the long-term implications of China demographic changes, we have to take action quite soon. Otherwise, it's too late for China to have a sustained development. So in terms of the demographic terms, I'm not as optimistic as Justin Lee, but 20 years, 8% growth. And I think if we can use China's labor force, we can make our all the policies, our systems correct. Okay, it's okay. But if we cannot make things quite correctly in a very short time period, we will be in trouble in the future.
Okay, thank you, Professor Peng. You've identified really quite a number of major demographic changes which are going to affect Chinese society and Chinese economy. Maybe we'll return to you for your thoughts on some of the possible policy solutions to such problems. Maybe I'll now turn to Professor Gang Li. Another issue identified by Professor Lin earlier this morning was income disparity. I think this is also really a very major issue that everyone talks about all the time in China. You've conducted first sort of major household surveys of consumer finances. I think in your work you also address this question about income disparity, and then your work probably could also provide some interesting insights on consumption pattern in China. Do you think the economic strategy of rebalancing the economy by increasing domestic demand and consumption will work? And then to what extent do you think the income disparity problem will persist?
Okay. First of all, thanks for inviting me. I also, like Professor Peng, disagree with Justin Lin's optimistic prediction. I think one of the things that disagree is he mentioned that China probably can still rely on exports to drive the economy because he thinks export contribution not large enough. He mentioned net exports. I think that's not necessarily correct. It should be it's exports, not net exports. I don't want to elaborate that, but I want to mention that particularly that Professor Tang just mentioned that I have since 2009 my team at the Southwestern University of Finance Economics. My team literally means thousands of students that have been working very hard, conducting a national survey called China Household Finance Survey. So 2011, we finished the first wave. 2012, we follow up with 2 rounds of the telephone survey. And 2013, in September, we finished up the second wave with 28,000 households. about 10 to 100,000 individuals in terms of the sample size. It's probably the largest non-government survey we know of in the world. There are many main findings from the 2013 data are not yet available. We're still working on it. I hope I can release some data I couldn't. But 2011 data has produced many major findings. One of them is income inequality. Briefly, that we have found that the Gini coefficient, income Gini coefficient in China is 0.61. It's one of the highest in the world. 0.61, yeah.
That's much higher than the official.
That's much higher than the official number. If you go to my afternoon's talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about why the difference with NBS data. Anyway, so that, but my argument here actually is like this. So first of all, I argue that 0.61 is actually not necessarily a bad thing. We have found from the data that actually is a consequence of the market competition, market economy. So we have tried various ways using the data. We basically come to the conclusion that more market economy, more market, market economy, better market economy developed regions, actually Gini coefficient is higher. Get rid of the state-owned enterprise, monopoly, people working in monopoly industries, get rid of the people, excluding those people working in government, Gini coefficient remains to be high. And we also argue that, that we also find, actually, that among OECD countries, although the Gini coefficient you've seen is around 0.3 range, but purely based on market income and market weight, the Gini coefficient is typically at 0.5 range, higher than 0.5. So what says that is China, as we all know, is a lot more diverse than any OECD countries probably. So we should expect Gini coefficient to be higher than 0.5 because China has almost no income transfer programs. So my first argument is, okay, Gini coefficient as high as 0.61, it really doesn't matter. There's a mystery in China that Gini coefficient higher than 0.4, some kind of a dangerous line. Higher than 0.6, revolution may come. Before I released the data, actually, I went to some of the senior government officials. They advised me not to do it, just advice, friendly advice. Nothing really happened. So I was telling them that, look, that mystery is actually a failure of academics in China. No academic study I can find have argued that Gini coefficient, the so-called 0.4, 0.6, this so-called danger line. A United Nations report somehow, somewhere said it, everybody cites that, and then everybody mutually cites without really going to the source. What I found is all the literature is not income inequality per se. It's opportunity inequality that caused the social problem. China, I argue that because of the national entrance exam system, like myself is a beneficiary, probably all, and everybody a beneficiary of that national entrance exam system, the basic opportunity equality still there. So no problem, 0.61. But the problem of that we found is actually high income inequality turns out it is the key of insufficient consumption in China. High saving rate, household saving rate in China, we know that many years, Chinese government have tried for over the last 20 years, various measures, all kinds of measures, including expansion of higher education, trying to lower the saving rate, increase the domestic consumption without much of success. The problem we find, using the micro level data, very clearly we find that high saving is high, aggregate level, but it is not every household saved. It is actually the rich who saves a lot, the poor who do not have the money save. 44% of the Chinese household in that year actually face liquidity constraint. They use up their income for consumption. One of the important group of the people who do not have savings at home is migrant families. The migrant families, they make a little bit more than the rural residents that move to city, but but they actually spend a lot more. So they have no saving at all for migrant families. So my argument here is the insufficient consumption in China, it is actually the problem of the income distribution. So it is not the problem. So income distribution does not typically, it's market economy driven, but it causes the insufficient consumption. So here comes, I think, the leadership, the historic opportunity of solving this problem actually can help the China transit from export and investment-driven oriented economy to a consumption-driven economy. So redistribution policy is no longer a redistribution policy just to make everybody happy. It actually becomes a growth policy. So my argument here is that the Chinese government can and should do in a very large scale increasing the transfer program. And I have actually suggested various programs that are incentive compatible, do not generate welfare dependent people. So so for that particular purpose, let me stop for the income check. Let me briefly mention several other major findings because of the briefly. First, related to urbanization, just give you some number. The Chinese, there is in China, everybody expects, or everybody, not everybody, lots of people expect the rate of urbanization, including DPM, right, mentioned that the rate of urbanization should increase because China is like 52%, roughly speaking, of people living in urban area, lower than Japan or other countries. But look at the data, micro level data, it is so clear that's not going to happen because if you look at the data, in the rural China, not many young people there. It's all old, middle and old age people, low educated, and also their grandchildren. So left behind children. So young people, young educated people are already gone to the city. They are already in the city, working in the city. So the further urbanization, who you are going to urbanize? Middle old age people are not going to, they're very difficult to come to the city because it's very difficult for them to find jobs. So my prediction is that the rate of urbanization in China will slow down, not increase. So that's the second. The third, actually, let me mention the housing market. So I will oversupply. Okay, briefly oversupply. It's oversupply in China. We find typically essentially that many Chinese households, we know in detail how many Chinese, what kind of household, how many households have multiple houses, multiple apartments. And we also know that when they purchased houses, if they had houses already, because we have the data, very detailed data. So nationwide, it is clearly an oversupply problem. The existing supply due to the multiple houses in China can almost satisfy essentially the current residential demand of all urban households. The ownership rate, home ownership in China is 86% in city. That's not only my data, many other data sets also verify this one. And we also know, do they buy houses for the kids or for upgrading or etc. So those information are pretty clearly show that oversupply. And only 1/3, we argue, probably 1/3 of the current capacity of real estate sector, or one half of the real estate current capacity can satisfy incremental demand from. So it's oversupply. The third, this is the fourth one actually in this one is regarding to the financial system. The third plenum, the document said that financial system reform. The data we show actually pretty simple. The data we show that it's Chinese formal financial system, banking system, is safe and sound, no problem. However, Chinese financial problem is informal sector. It's inter-household borrowing and lending. 33% of the Chinese family have borrowing and lending from their friends. Only 14% of them have borrowing from the banks. So the percentage is a huge difference. When they borrow, it is poor households who borrow from the friends and relatives, and the amount is big, is huge. So my argument, if there is a problem, financial problem, it's going to happen in the informal sector. When it happens in the informal sector, because I borrowed your money, your money for medical expenditure, your money for retirement, your money for your kids' education, I cannot pay. What happened? I'm doing wrong. And we become, from friends, become enemies. So we're going to, it's going to cause social problems. It's going to cause huge social problems. That's much harder problem, much more difficult problem than just simply mortgage-driven, like your formal financial thing. You just write off the bad days, print more money, solve the problem. But this one you can. This one you can. So anyway, I'm stopping here.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have fundamental shifts in China's demographic development, migration, labor shortage. All these are the things that Professor Pan suggested earlier. Now Professor Gang Li told us that there are even more serious issues in terms of income disparity. Even though I think the nuance is important, that it's not necessarily a problem. Right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a problem. The income inequality is
but then that's a great problem in terms of purchasing and consumption. And then we have the urbanization is going to slow down. We have oversupply of properties. So maybe it's a good time to turn to Mr. Ling Yan, who has been very successful in investing in properties and having other major projects in China. Do you think China is still a good market?
It's always very complex when you have to deal with China. On the one hand, we hear Professor Justin Ling talking about 20 years of 8% growth. You hear about DPM, about that China having a lot more potential than what it is now. So, but on the other hand, we hear the demographic data, the surveys that have been coming up. So I think this is necessary sort of environment that we operate in. So as a business, as a company, we always have to deal with this kind of uncertainties and this kind of not having very precise data. So how do we handle such a situation? I would say that maybe if we just take population data that Professor mentioned just now. I think even 10 years ago, when we first looked at this issue about demographics and population, it was at that time not evident to us in Shanghai especially that there will be a labor shortage. But during that time, we were very clear that in the longer term, this labor shortage will come about. And this issue about the China population aging, that the population dividend will sort of dwindle off towards the middle part, towards the middle of this decade, became very evident. So we, for example, our service apartment operation, instead of focusing on hotel, where typically you have 2 staff to 1 hotel room, we focus on a service apartment where we can be a lot more efficient and providing what the customers will need for the service apartment. Our typical staff to room ratio is about 1.35 staff to a room, instead of as compared to a hotel where you're talking about 2 staff to a room. So since that time, we have been looking at how we can make it more efficient in the way we operate the service apartment. And I would say that having looked at that, and over the period of the last 10 years at least, we see that beginning to bear fruits for us. So that's one area that we can make use of the data. I still remember in the year 2000 when I first went over to Shanghai, there were also a lot of data about oversupply of apartments in Shanghai. And in fact, that was a time where they talk about vacancy rates in Shanghai was 20-30%. So when we look at this data, obviously many of my investors became very concerned. I was based in Shanghai at that time. So I went to try to understand where are these vacant apartments and what is happening to these vacant apartments. So when I went to check many of these apartments, then I realized that the quality of the construction wasn't good at the time for many of the projects. And these apartments are empty for a reason because they are not well constructed, they are not properly designed. So So as a result, I started to explain to my investors using the term effective supply and not effective supply. And those, although they are captured in the statistics, they are not effective supply to the market. So what was important that we have to locate, we have to build a project at a good location where there will be demand for the apartment, and you have to design in such a way that the customer will want to have it. So that's how we overcome some of these issues. Even at that time, I still remember there were also, in Beijing, there was this concern that we have a massive oversupply of office. So I was on the ground in Beijing, I talked to many of went to visit many of the office towers, and I also talked to many of these companies who are thinking of setting up shops in Beijing. So there were a few statistics that straight away sort of struck me that, yes, there may be a vacancy rate of 20% in Beijing. In the office market, if you hit 20-30% vacancy rate, it's very high. It means that the 20-30% of the stocks or the investments that have gone to these office towers are wasted. They are inefficient. So when you look at it on the macro basis, it is very frightening. But we had an opportunity at that time in 2005, I still remember, looking at an office tower. We said this is a very good location. So do I take a position or do I not take a position? So after analyzing, and at that time I was talking to not KPMG, but one of your competitors. So they were looking at setting up an office in Beijing. So I said, how many staff are you thinking of recruiting this year? They said 5,000 staff. 5,000 staff. I said, wow, this is a very big number. So how much space are you thinking of getting? They said, we need 13 floors. Each floor about 2,000 to 3,000 square meters. So I asked straight away Tom, my colleagues back in Singapore, I said, how much does this company, how much space do they use in Singapore? He said, oh, they take about 3 floors, 4 floors. So in just one move, they are thinking of setting up a headquarters and they are looking at 13 floors, showing about 3,000 square meters. So the kind of demand that we will see is very different. So having analyzed that and looking at the market, again, I went to visit some of the office towers in Beijing. And a lot of them are also at that point, again, they are not very well designed, with very low ceiling. I don't know why it is the case, but many of the older office towers in Beijing tend to have very low ceiling. So we said, okay, I think we can make a difference here. We can have a product that will differentiate ourselves from the rest of the product. We have a good location, and we managed to, we started the project, we decided to take over, upgraded the project to what we call International Grade A office tower. So with that, and because it was in a good location, we studied the surrounding traffic. And Beijing, you know, is notorious. It's notorious for its traffic condition. A lot of people get caught in the jam. So we studied that particular location, and we know that the way the traffic network is being designed, in future it will be even more convenient than to cross the road. We are on Chang'an Dajie, to cross the road is China Road. So we said that given that the traffic is going to be a lot better, we upgrade it to an international grade A. We have a prominence along Chang'an Dajie. Then we will have a very unique selling proposition. So in which case we went ahead and did the project. But when the project was completed in 2007, we couldn't sleep because it's not easy to lease out, right? Because it's going to be challenging still. So within the first few months, we managed to achieve the level of occupancy. I said, good thing the investors never asked me, what is your occupancy? Because at that time it was still fairly, it's not high. The environment wasn't as favorable as we hoped it would be. But at the end of the 1 year, I still remember we were hitting almost 90% occupancy. So that was the time that we had very confidently tell our investors and also to tell the market that because we have chosen the right location, because we have differentiated ourselves, we are able to then perform and achieve the return that we are looking for. And while macro statistics are very important, which I will be consulting with Professor Tanvi and Professor Tong very soon, it's also very important for companies to be on the ground, to understand what the customers are looking for, to study into details why certain things are working and why certain things are not working. So these are, I would say, that's perhaps the way as a company how I will respond to some of the statistics that we are seeing. In fact, I'm very interested in what Professor Tani will have later on about this data survey as to which areas or which cities will have so-called massive supply and which city will have perhaps a more resilience of the market. And with Professor Tom, I think they are looking at the demographics. Again, this will be important for us to then think about how we should design our apartments, how we should design our shopping mall to better cater to, for example, the aging population. There will also be opportunities there because if the population is aging, obviously their needs will be very different. And there are occasions in which we can design communities in such a way that we can help them to provide certain services very efficiently. So these are things that we, as a company, I will look at it more as opportunities than as challenges. Because if at the end we see all these as challenges, we will not do anything.
Thank you. Well, we'll turn to Diana for your thoughts about how companies might make a difference. I understand that the number of NGOs looking at different social issues have really been increasing rather rapidly in China. What is the landscape now? Why things are changing so quickly on this area of corporate social responsibility?
Yeah, I'm sure. First of all, maybe just to set the tone, I'll just share with you a little bit about what is the current situation about the civil society. I mean, we are in Singapore, so we can, talk about civil society as a very, public term. But in China, actually, civil society actually is a very sensitive word. The official registered NGOs in China, it's close to about 500,000. But the unofficial numbers, since we like to have data today, their official, Gini coefficient in China and unofficial numbers as well, and in the NGO world as well. So the unofficial number actually is close to 3 million nowadays. So why is that? I mean, obviously you can see, there is a role for the civil society to fill the gap that the government or sometimes the business sector could not. And also driven by a lot of on-the-ground social issues and environmental issues. Let me just share with you some of the key issues that these NGOs are working very hard on, and also just provide you with a little bit different perspective in terms of what's going on in China. And in terms of corporate social responsibility, I think there is a huge role for business because from day one, it's very clear for business to be financially sustainable. That's a very clear objective. But for NGOs, that may not be the case. So today, if you look at, let's say, the official number, 3 million NGOs, how many of them can be sustainable, in the long run? Probably, I would say 80% or even 90% of them cannot be sustainable if you look at their balance sheet or financial performance. So some of the key social issues that I do want to kind of, share with you. The first one, which is because we are at the SMU, right? It's related to higher education. According to, the data that we have received in actually 2013 this year, the number of university graduates is close to 7 million in China. And before their graduation, only 35% of them have received job offers. And for the master degree students, graduate students, before their graduation, the percentage of receiving a job offer is even lower. It's about 26%. Okay. Then you tend to think, okay, every year there's so many people graduating with a high education degree, then why is the market not absorbing these kind of, extremely well-educated youngsters. If you compare US and China, think about it in the United States, okay? The value added, I would say, the value added GDP for service industry, it's about 80% of their total GDP. So which is like a huge market to absorb highly educated university graduates. But in China, I mean today, okay, in the United States, in China, the speculation is in 2015, probably for the service industry, only 45% of them can absorb these highly educated young graduates. So there's a huge gap. So now you have a lot of, well-educated youngsters in the labor market, but the market actually, it's not big enough to absorb them. But in the same time, they're probably not willing to take some of the lower skill jobs. So this is one of the issues that, many of the companies probably can contribute to help resolve. And another thing, that I do want to share with you, it's regarding to the wealth gap, but I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to go into the details, but I just want to throw out a few numbers just for comparison purposes. For instance, the top 5% household income compared to the lowest 5% household income in China, it's 234 times. Okay, and if you compare the richest city, which is in Shenzhen, in China, to the poorest city in China, which is called Beipiao in Liaoning province, it's 83 times more in terms of the GDP per capita. Okay, if you try to put things in perspective a little bit, in South America, the richest city is Chile, and the poorest actually is Bolivia. And the GDP per capita, actually the difference, it's only 7.3 times. Okay, so which means I think in China, when it comes to income disparity or poverty situation, we have a long way to go. And of course, Professor Gan and also Professor Pan, they touched a little bit of the migrant worker issue in China. 260 million migrant workers working in the big cities, first tier, second tier. But another issue that has also come up with these migrant workers are the left behind children, meaning in the rural area you do only see the elderly people and also the left behind children who do not receive proper education. Plus 61 million children, the total number of these left behind children, plus, the children who actually went to the cities to receive education with their parents, the total amount actually is 61 million. That's a huge number. But because of the hukou problem, these children who are even having an education in, let's say, Beijing or in Shanghai, after they graduate from junior high school, they have to return to their hometown to advance their senior high school. Otherwise, they have no opportunity to go into the formal system and then to the university. So this is actually a huge issue, social issue in China that we just have to address. And I think one of the person in the audience, asked Professor Lin earlier about the environmental issue. How for instance, the growth of the economy. What's the impact in terms of what kind of price you would have to pay when you try to resolve some of the environmental issues. I just want to cite, a report that has been published in 2006. It's called the Stern Report. I don't expect any of you to read a 700-page Stern Report. But the essence, basically, of that report, Mr. Stern, he suggested, if you do not invest 1% of your GDP to help resolve some of these environmental issues today, which is back in 2006, and he readjusted that number to 2% of the GPT in 2008, then the cost, the price, actually, for all the business has to pay, probably in 2010 or 2020, it's going to be more than 20% of the GDP, or even more going forward. So, when it comes to some of these social issues, environmental issues, especially in China, it's more than just, something the government has the ability or the capacity to deal with. The civil society, the business sector in particular, we all have the responsibility. And collaboration, basically, is the key, And we have to find a new framework, how to work with each other and try to transform our know-how or help these, NGOs to become sustainable and to help them to build their capacity. And more importantly, I think transparency and accountability is the key.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Before I sort of open the floor for questions and discussions, maybe I'll ask one very quick question for each of you. In the third plenum communique, the date 2020 was mentioned as the date when the reforms would achieve their objectives. Professor Gang Li, what do you think the household survey results will be by 2020 if you are going to conduct another household survey? By around that time, do you think the patterns you have identified will remain the same, or would be hoping for something entirely different?
First of all, I have a commitment that the university has a commitment to continue this project for years to come, at least. I think hopefully 20, 30 years to come, it become a regular, credible data set shared by, the data set actually can be distributed to the public. So I think that is a commitment. But from 10 years from now, 2020, what's going to happen for the household survey?
Only I will phrase my question. What you would hope the household survey results will be like?
Okay. Well, I certainly hope. I certainly hope Professor Lin's prediction is right. Certainly, I think if that were the case, we're all very happy. And achieving that goal with a better, equal society and more efficient, we can certainly describe a good picture of the Chinese economy 10 years from now. I think the third panel, the company is not clear of the goal. It says the goal, but not yet clear. I think months to come, we're going to see better elaborated goal. What's going to happen? Then we should wait to see. We can see.
Thank you. Professor Pan, I know you've been producing many excellent works and books. By 2020, if you're publishing your fourth or fifth book on demographic changes in China, what would you think the title of the book would be?
I think that China will, as challenges will be continually maintained. China's population policy or population control policy, or simply said the One China policy, I think by the year 2020 will be more or less relaxed a lot. So all the way
The challenges will be not as
challenge will be still there because we will talk about demography things, we talk about long terms. Because what will be the future in the year 2020 is already there. Because the childbearing future labor force will depend on what happened 10 or 15 years ago, what the China burning 15 years ago. So the labor force decline will continue. But how deep of the labor force supply will depend on how much our the younger generation they are willing to produce how many kids they want to produce, and also how much the government allows them to produce. So this could be something. Optimistically, I hope that China's public policy will be changed gradually. But by the year 2020, it will be much better. Chinese family will get more freedom to choose how many children they want. But of course, aging at that time will be more serious than nowadays. I hope, as you have already said, this also provides a lot of opportunity for the business. If we can really treat the aging is a normal situation, not an abnormal situation. So in that case, we can restructure our systems, restructure our pension systems, the long-term care system, Medicare systems. So if we can do this kind of thing correctly in 7 years time period, so we can see a much better, much harmonized society in the year 2020. And also, I hope that your business, you can do a lot of these kind of aging-related the estate development programs. Then yeah. So I think this could be, but we only have 7 years to go, so we need to take action on this.
So your title of the book?
The challenge remains.
What would you be reporting on as the success of KPMG?
Well, I think, as one of the Big Four, we are always, proud of being transparent and accountable, I guess. And this is one of our professional core competencies. And I think, CSR probably means a little bit different for different industry, for different, companies. And my personal belief is you have to really align your core competency and work with the right stakeholders on the ground to maximize your impact. So I hope by working more closely with the civil society sector, the NGO sector, and the government, that we can help to change their mindset, and hoping, we can probably deliver more trainings or educational programs to help them understand the importance of being transparent and accountable to everything that they do on the ground, and also moving towards the sustainable future. But again, like Professor Pan was saying, the challenge remains.
Thank you. Well, in the end, you are reporting to the board and the investors by 2020 about your greatest investment successes. What are the successes that you hope you could report on?
I remain very optimistic about what is going to happen in China. I think for the next, some of the issues, obviously there are challenges. I think here talk about some of these challenges in economic reform. But I believe that economic reform is the direction that Chinese government will continue to push. And because of that, I remain very optimistic about what is going to happen in China. And I believe by then, China is already our largest, it's the single largest market. So I believe by then it will be even bigger portion of our overall group, perhaps crossing the 50% mark. Now it's about close to 40%. And we also hope that maybe, hopefully by then, that there will be enough opening up of the capital market, so the real estate and the capital market can then sort of reinforce each other and allow capitals to be more efficiently deployed within the overall economy of China.
So you don't want to tell us what would be your biggest success in 7 years?
There will be many things.
The floor is open for questions. Please introduce yourselves before you raise the question. We have Zhang Wei, Professor
Zhang Wei from SMU School of Law. I have a question for Professor Gao Li. I'm really fascinated by your explanation of the reason why China remained stable despite the huge inequality in income, and especially fascinated by your idea of the equal opportunity in China. And you raised the example of the national entrance exam, which keeps somehow the opportunities given equal in China. But of course, we know that will not be the only thing that can level the ground, so to speak, for Chinese. It's interesting to hear from Ms. Diana Cui just now that even if the opportunity in university entrance exam is kind of equal, however, that does not mean that you can still find a job. The rate of job offering among the university graduates is really low, only at 37, if I remember correctly, %. Do you think, or what will be your response to this kind of phenomena? Do you think that is kind of equal opportunity kind of unemployment, so to speak? And as a related question, actually, I believe you must know that last year there was a very popular book published. Actually, it was written by the MIT economist Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson of Kennedy School at Harvard. So in their book, they said that China basically is a kind of extractive growth model. So I'm curious whether you find any hint from your survey data which can either substantiate or to refute their propositions on the extractive model of Chinese growth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe collect a couple of other questions, and then hopefully we can have 2 rounds. Professor Jeremy Chan.
Talking about Jeremy Chan, I'm currently visiting NTU from New Zealand. Since we're talking about social issues in this panel, I'm just wondering about a very simple question. We are talking about roughly 10% GDP growth for China over the past 3 decades or so. In relation to, shall I rephrase the question again? Since we are talking about social issues, therefore I want to ask a question simply about some statistics, in fact. We are talking about 10% growth of GDP per year over the past 3 decades or so. That's understandable. For environmental costs, since we're talking about environmental issues, water, security, and food and so on earlier this morning, there has been statistics ranging anything from about 5% GDP to even over 10% of China's GDP as a result of the cost of environmental degradation. Now, I'm just wondering whether there is any statistics on the cost of social problems in China. Whether it is the housing problem, demographic problems, problems of consumption, or civil society, or other issues. Is there a figure there which you can pin on, as a result of the problems in Chinese society? There is an amount we can equivalent to economic terms. Just a simple statistical question.
Okay.
Actually, this is a question to all the panelists. There is an issue of the relation between marriage and real estate in China. So with the demographics really going to an aging population, it also means that people can, and with a house price increase, people can only afford to buy a house much later in life. But that will have an impact on also the total fertility rate because of the delay. So what impact do you think, how can policymakers help in solving this problem?
Okay, we will have 3 questions, and then we'll go to the second one.
Okay, so let me briefly answer your question. Okay, your first question about the college graduate cannot find jobs. So let me complement with Diana's data because my data has unemployment rate. So unemployment rate for those who between age 20 and 25 who are not in college, age 20 and who are not in college. So the college graduate with college degree, the unemployment rate is 16%. The elementary school kids, elementary people with elementary low education, the unemployment rate is 4%. It's a mismatch. So this data has been widely reported. So there is a mismatch problem. But however, later in their years, the college graduates have much lower unemployment rate. So it is they're not willing to take the not good offers, but they have to later years. So I would say certainly there is not enough opportunity equality at the time they graduate. So there's lots of guanxi relationship is obviously very important. What I'm saying, this is a basic. I'm saying this is basic. The situation is getting worse, that's for sure. But we have a basic opportunity equality. So this is one thing. To answer another question is about this book. I read the book. Like many of this type of books, there's always, in any society, you can always find evidence of inclusive development. And you can always find evidence of inclusive extractive growth or extractive society versus inclusive society. My take on this understanding is very fascinating book. I like it. I'm not completely buying it, I'm not completely not buying it. My view of this is I'm going to look at a particular problem using the data and say something about it. Not just to make a broad statement, this is inclusive society or this is extractive society. No. So my state, you can always find evidence of either way, of any society. Anyway, so.
I think in terms of the employment, youth employment, I think there's also in the special period of the social transition. On the one hand, China's higher education expanded very rapidly. In 1997, China's annual enrollment of new students is 1 million. But 15 years later, annually we enroll students almost 7 million. So the expansion of China's higher education are much faster than China's upgrading of China's economy. So this is a mismatch of the skills education and with the job requirement for the education. So that's, I think, for at least to the 2020, there will be continuous shortage of manual labor supply, and it will continuous difficult for the university graduates to find their jobs. So I think that's, on the one hand, this could be very painful experience for this kind of graduate student and their families, because they spend a lot of money, spend time to get a certificate, but they cannot find a job. On the other hand, I think it's also maybe a good human resource in the future, because when China has such a larger base of the well-educated labor force in the future, so this may further accelerate China's economic upgrade in the future. So this could be the mixed pictures. And regarding the marriage and the household, house buying, or this kind of thing, actually in China, data said the first, the age at the first buy of the house is only 26 years. So it's very much younger than you can find any these kind of ages in other countries. So it means not the person, the young person, they buy the house by themselves, but actually their family to support them to buy a house. So in that case, I think that maybe it's good news for you, because because I think that in China, especially the baby boomer generation, they are gradually well into retirement ages. So they have accumulated some wealth over the last 30 years. They are beneficiaries of the economic reform. But compared to their younger generation, their financial situation much better than their younger generation. Yeah, so in that way you will find this kind of intergenerational wealth flow. So that's in Chinese we call it 啃老族. 啃老族 maybe become more and more common. And also linked to the employment. The many of these kind of young university graduates, when they graduate, if they cannot find the job they want, So they stay at home, they're supported by their families. So this also, this situation will be continued in the future. So I think that definitely marriage will affect the house buyers, their situation. But in general, I think that in China, it's not only the young generation themselves, but the whole family. The buy a house is a family business.
Yes, yes. I think we certainly observed that in both Singapore and China. In Singapore, my colleagues tell me we have the PAP. So what is PAP? Parent Assisted Purchase. So in China, I also understand from my colleagues that who are directly fronting with the customer that we do have a lot of young people buying. But because now the initial down payment is very high, 50-60%. So a lot of these down payment are paid for by the parents. So you also have parent assisted purchase in China.
Maybe I'll just quickly address, one of the question, the social impact, for instance, how to measure, are there statistics. I think it's much harder compared to some of the environmental statistics, simply because, that there's no benchmarking system. Even in the area of poverty alleviation, in China, you do have counties that are subsidized by the Chinese government. Every year they allocate a certain amount of money to support that poverty county. And there are news being reported. Actually, the county celebrates, being labeled as a poverty county, because that means, a huge amount of subsidy can be attracted to the county to help their further development. It's not a very healthy phenomena, but I think just from an accounting perspective, I think it's very difficult to measure in that perspective, and also in the China environment, it's probably even more difficult. But back to the youth employment, I just want to give you maybe just 2 quick comments regarding my observation. The first thing is, for instance, we have moved part of our back office operation to Foshan just recently. Our Foshan center just opened in July this year, which employed about 300 people in that neighborhood, and the majority of them are university graduates. So back to the youth, and especially the youth unemployment among the highly educated youngsters. We ought to think about some of the solutions, not just relying on the government to help resolve that kind of situation. If you look at some of the statistics this year, actually, in China, it's quite usual for a university graduate to enter a company and then change to another job within 6 months period of time. Okay, it's quite a phenomenon. But this year, actually, if you take a look at the data, more people, they are reluctant to jump from one company to another. The number actually drives down quite substantially, simply because, it's a very tough market. And maybe you're all familiar with, another term in China called ant tribes, those university students who graduated from the 3rd tier, 4th tier cities. He entered, Beijing, Shanghai, especially Beijing, and then they lived in the outskirts of Beijing, traveling every day 2 hours to work and back. Not actually in a very well-paid, job. Maybe you're talking about they're earning 4,000, 5,000 RMB, barely to support their day-to-day life and live in very, very bad conditions. In order to attract these people to go back to their hometown and still feeling, they have a future, I think this is one of the areas the business sector can contribute, for larger companies like us. Maybe we can offer, more job opportunities in some of the 2nd tier, 3rd tier cities, and setting up, some of these back offices so that they can be closer to home, and for Those in the manufacturing business nowadays, everybody knows, in the Dongguan area or in the coastal area, the production cost has been really becoming unbearable. So many of them actually are moving into the inner China, right? To set up their production offices. So these are all the opportunities, I think, for the business organizations to help address some of these social issues and make a substantial contribution.
So we have a final round of questions.
Excellent. My name is Kim Hwan from Roger and Tanner Law Firm. If one were to look at China's development over the years since 1978, other than the economic statistics, it's actually not plain sailing, especially through the 80s, and that culminated in the June 4th incident in 1989. And it actually took Deng Xiaoping in 1992 Southeast trip in order to reignite the growth engine again. And since then, we have 20 years of British slow sailing. And what we heard this morning is there are income disparity issue, unemployment issues, and this seems like a catalyst for a storm that is now on the horizon. So my question to the panel is, do you think there are really thunder clouds, at the horizon that one needs to be worried about? If so, is there something that can do to diffuse the cloud before it becomes a huge thunderstorm? And would the recent much talk about Shanghai FTA, not FTA, free trade zone, be the magic potion that can cure some of these ills? Especially, the aim is to actually reignite growth again in China, but a bit on a different path.
Thanks a lot. My name is Li Zi from National University of Singapore School of Design and Environment. Very interesting one talk about the social issue in China, and I think one of these issue is about the rural area, the rural society, because as I understand, China this kind of high raisings of the economic development because they put the free land, most free land and the cheap laborers in market. So this drive the next 30 years. Maybe will also drive the next 30 years if Stienberg, the government Stienberg. So I have a question about this because the farmers, the rural area people, they lose a lot. And I know Professor Peng, especially because the rural societies. I'm just wondering to think about some model, special around Shanghai or in the source because of very diversity of the whole China. How you think about this? A good model yet here can develop the social communities in rural area. And second, I also know that GPMG do this kind of social issue like a rural community in Sichuan province, and also trying to do more this issue. And also I'm wondering how the cooperation with your company and the local NGO or government company, how you think about future? Because you have experiment, but for future, do you think about a new model, sustainable model like this? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Our commander-in-chief has reminded me that the time is running out, so we have to conclude. The panelists could respond quickly, less than a minute, to these final questions on the thunderstorm and on the rural area.
Maybe not so much about the thunderstorm. I think more about the question of what is sustainable way of helping some of the communities. I was fortunate enough that in the early 2004, when we did an official opening of the breakfast city in Shanghai, from the ground up, I think the staff was continuously asked that maybe we should also do some charity program. So as a result, we managed to collect some money from the public, and then we matched dollar for dollar and use that to work with this Shanghai Project Hope office, 希望工程办. Then you see, Shanghai has about a program to help Yunnan. So we, through the Shanghai Project Hope office, went over to Yunnan to help donate the proceeds to the school. Of course, that proceeds go to helping the school build their main school building as well as some of the accommodation for kids who are living in the mountains. So it's easier for them to go to school. So, but what amazes me most is when I was there was this official from Shanghai. He was actually posted to Yunnan to help them. And when I started talking to him about what are the things that he had been doing for 2 years as a, they call 市长助理, it means the assistant to the mayor of that particular district. So he was trying very hard to see how he can introduce economic activities in such a way that the community there can be self-sustaining after that. And one of the things they worked very hard on was how to so-called commercialize the tea plantation in Yunnan. So they managed to introduce, they bring in the particular tea plant, and they teach the people there how to grow it and how to process it into, eventually it becomes the Pu'er cha. So this place is now renamed as Pu'er instead of, I can't remember the old name, Simao. Instead of Simao, it became Pu'er. So they used that as he was sharing a lot of his own expertise to see how he can help the community that's in the mountain to be self-sustaining. So this method of helping, which I was very impressed with, came from the Shanghai government. And I know also through another project we tried to help in another city. I think the government in that particular city said, oh, this is not necessary, you just give them money and they will take care of it, which I believe is not going to work. So in the case of Shanghai, I must say that the government has done very well to make sure that the money not just go into giving them the fish, but also teaching them how to fish.
I think there are many cases that I can talk about regarding KPMG's effort, but it will take another half an hour, right, at least. So I just want to give you one or two very quick examples, how we try to engage other stakeholders, meaning, working with other business organizations, our clients, our suppliers, the NGOs, as well as the local governments, try to come up with a very innovative idea. One example I can give you is after the Sichuan earthquake 2008, we, just among our staff, we raised a lot of money. And then our foundation matched it dollar to dollar. So, in addition to a lot of other, traditional efforts that we have done on the charitable side, we decided to build the first long-span bamboo architecture in a rural area called Shifeng County, which is about 1.5 hours from the Chengdu city. And this community center, the idea is, to make it sustainable and maximize the utilization of that community center by providing vocational training, attract tourism, so that, the 20,000 residents there can have a better, opportunity and to stimulate their economic development, as well as, to also provide some after-school activities, so on and so forth. But the unique concept, actually, who will think an accounting firm will invest in an environmental carbon neutral community center? But we did it, actually, and we did it not just because, we are willing to come up with that kind of money, because, the design, since you're in design, actually the design of the building was made on pro bono basis by an architecture firm in Hong Kong. Cambridge University did the energy audit. One of the bamboo floor supplier donated the material. Solar panel was also donated by another, new energy manufacturer in China. The technology itself was imported from Japan. The project management actually came from UK. So it's really, I think, in my view, that is the beauty of a new innovation. Otherwise, we probably can spend maybe 10 times the resources in making it happen. So I think when you think about corporate social responsibility going forward, it's not like we are competing with our competitors, okay? I think it's a collaborative effort among all sectors, civil society, the government, even working with your competitors per se, to work on, the common and try to, in the same time, I think that the investment has to make good business sense in the long run as well.
Yeah. First, I think that we need integrated programs. Sometimes if I'm very happy you are supported the Hope Elementary School is still there. But actually, in China, many of these kind of schools spend a lot of money to develop. Usually they spend 150,000 Chinese yuan, 15万, to develop 希望小学. Many of them are disappeared. Because on the one hand, it's because the school-age kids is the number of them are declining. And also, a larger amount of them are actually accompany their parents get the education in the coastal area or in the cities. So that's when we said this kind of the new rural development program, actually, I think it's kind of failure. So we need actually some kind of balance the urban development and rural development. We need integrated programs to combine these kind of two things, work together. But in the past, we usually every government ministry, they have some kind of program. So they use the program to spend the money, but actually some of these programs are contradictory with each other, with a lot of money. So this means we need integrated programs. The second is we need comprehensive reforms. Now when we talk about the population issues, on the one hand we said the population policy should be changed to give the people more freedom to decide how many children they want. But on the other hand, the aging is an inevitable process. Even we change the population policy, but they cannot stop the aging process. Also, we cannot, if we try to solve the problem of aging, we need to reform our education to promote the lifelong learning system. We need to develop, to reform our pension systems. We need to reform our this kind of hukou system and reform our Medicare systems. So when we talk about demographic problems, demographic challenges, so we cannot rely on the demographic related policies to solve these challenges. We need a comprehensive reform to do these policies.
Briefly, because time is up. I think that one way I hope KPMG and other NGOs will participate is to do this we call conditional cash transfer, CCT program. Many developing countries, lots of successful programs to help the poor. I think given the project, you have a good project, smart, the system mayor, that's fine, but those do not come very often. And the building communities benefits the community, and it's pretty expensive, I guess. So I would say doing something like experiments, the conditional cash transfer. For example, in Liangshan, Sichuan Liangshan, very, very poor, Yizu, very, very poor, even they don't want to go to hospital because of the tradition, go to hospital to be their babies. So that's it's not very healthy. So now they have a program that give you money. If you come to hospital, not only free, but also give you money to do that. So that has lots of people encouraged to come to the hospital and deliver healthy babies. For the school kids, building the project called elementary schools, it's a surprise, building a beautiful campus. But if parents do not want to send their kids there because it's not very helpful, it's not going to be useful. So there's a conditional cash transfer program happen in Shanxi. What they do is, if you send your kids to school, guarantee 80% attendance rate, 80% of the days you're there, you get $500 or 500 yuan per month. That helps a lot. That's called conditional cash transfer. So I think China has almost nothing like that. And but other developing countries, many projects like that, which can create incentive-compatible program helping the poor. Okay.
Thank you. My own work on China focuses on international relations. And people talk about war and peace and major power competition. But when you travel in China and talk to people, you realize that the kind of discussions we had, kind of social problems that have emerged, the economic challenges, the desire, aspiration for people to participate in public policy, to think about immediate urgent problems that we need to deal with is really more often the kind of topics that we encounter. And today I think the panelists offer us much thought and wisdom on such topics. And I don't know whether we challenge the earlier session's conclusions. I certainly think that the panelists have enriched us in terms of our understanding of what's going on in China. Thank you so much.